Donald Trump saying he expects, quote, happy people today after he's partly backed down from his policy splitting children from their parents. But for the more than 2,000 children who've already been separated under Trump's policies, well, the damage goes on. NBC News speaking to a Michigan foster mother caring for 5 migrant children split from their parents.
One of my children was separated from his father, and just some signs of trauma are lack of sleep, real trouble with food, wanting to eat, no appetite, agitated, not calm, anxious, always inquiring about the whereabouts of his father. When would he be able to connect with family? When could he talk to them? And we were not able to take care of that or connect him because we didn't have a phone number.
Now, some of these children were taken thousands of miles from their parents, and they arrive in new cities, even, we're learning, under the cover of night, and that includes Manhattan. Reporter Josh Robin was tipped off that children were being brought to a foster agency last night. This was after midnight, but he went and got the footage you're seeing here. New York's governor later confirming that the young people in this video are border migrants. Josh is here to explain his reporting. Now, as Trump takes this victory lap, what about these kids? What about their parents, many of whom may be deported before any chance at reunification? Well, they must not be in the group of people Donald Trump says are happy today. And here's why a former ICE director says these kind of situations are avoidable and families should never have been split in the first place.
Keep families together at almost all costs, because once you separate those families, you run a serious risk that they never see each other again. When the children are separated from their parents, they're treated as unaccompanied minors. They go on a separate legal track than do the parents. The parents can be deported very quickly. So now you have the parent back in Honduras or Guatemala, and the child could be in a child care facility somewhere in the United States, thousands of miles from the border. It gets very hard for the federal government to coordinate and track the location of both people.
The reporter who exposed this story is Josh Robin. Overnight, he saw those young girls being taken to the Foster Services Center. That's this footage you're seeing, and you may have seen it going viral today online. He joins me, as well as Julio Ricardo Varilla, co-host of the political podcast In the Thick and founder of the blog Latino Rebels, and Erica Andiola back with us. Josh, how did you find this? What does it mean?
Well, we got a tip. I got a tip from a source, and then another source confirming it, telling me to show up at a facility that's on Park Avenue, but not the fancy Park Avenue in East Harlem. We go there, and it's dark, and it doesn't look like there's anyone around, and we're waiting around. And then after midnight, shortly before 1, a car pulls up, and a bunch of young girls come out. And it was extremely mysterious. And I think that the importance of it is not just that people recognize that this is happening, but I think this is really the first time that we, as a nation, have understood that this isn't just a problem that is on the southern border. This is right in other places, including now New York City.
Could you glean from being there how the treatment was, how the young women, the young girls were doing? Did they seem confused? Did they seem upset? Had they sort of figured out just how to go along with it? Could you glean anything from the ground there?
They seemed resigned. I mean, it was pretty astounding. You know, these were young girls, maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, right, and it's the middle of the night, and they are out. They were with some chaperones, it appeared like. They didn't seem particularly agitated. They really seemed resigned to it. They were put into a car afterwards. They went inside to this facility for about an hour and then emerged covered so as to conceal their identity.
Yeah, we're looking at some of that. I mean, and one can understand why that measure may be taken as they're loaded into this car, but it's also, you know, it's also children in New York under a black blanket, effectively.
Right. Although, you know, the images that we showed here on New York One, we didn't show their faces. We just felt that it was important for New Yorkers to know that this is happening here. And indeed, in the wake of this, Mayor de Blasio actually held a news conference. Our Mayor Bill de Blasio held a news conference, and more information emerged, which is that this center alone has 239 kids that they're processing who have been separated from their parents. So this number 2,000 across the nation might be really low. The estimates here in the city or in the state are 100 to 300. But if there's 239 alone in the center, then it makes sense that there are more. And frankly, we're not getting information from the federal government.
And what you're reporting there goes to, Erica, is I think two themes. One, apart from the moral and policy dimension of this, if politics is local and people think of this as something that only happens at the border, this reporting shows just how wrong that is. If young people are being effectively orphaned by these Trump orders, that's something that then has years of consequence, not only for them, but for every part of America that has to deal with it. Number two, reading from the New York Times reporting, however these young people may appear in the moments on camera, the Times shows institutions by the nature warp these attachments of the children that they long for, that they need, and they're then lifelong risk for cardiovascular and mental health disease, risk of course, lasting emotional problems. An expert telling the Times, the earlier they're out, the better. Put that in a context for us, as tonight's news is, number one, Trump partly backing down on doing this, but number two, thousands of these kids in the situation. That continues.
This is a problem that it's gotten to a point where America has woken up and has said, no, you're getting children ripped away from their parents. The fact is that we have already dealt with family detention centers, that we have already dealt with shelters and places across the country that do house children, that do house entire families, in detention. Even under the Obama administration, this was already happening. There wasn't much attention on it, and now there is. So my biggest hope is that we can make sure that all the outrage, all the people that are getting ready to go to march, to march in the 30th and the 2nd of July, that they still show up, and that yes, perhaps there was a small change that happened because of the pressure, but that we can still say, you know what, this is not what we're about, right? And not only that we go to our local elected officials in places where there is detention centers, where there is jails or places that have children and that have families and that have migrants that are detained there and for profit, completely for profit. Right. And so this is the moment to continue to be loud about it and not let what Trump just did, make us think that this has gone away, because it hasn't.
Julio?
Yeah, I mean, the other things that I do want to bring up, Latino Rebels published an open letter from a counselor from the Office of Refugee Resettlement. The person wished to remain anonymous, but provided some very interesting information that now the ORR, as they're known, has to provide personal information to DHS about sponsors in the country who want to take some of these kids and bring them into their home. Now, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be an aunt or an uncle, but there's a fear now that these sponsors, some of them might be undocumented, and by giving this personal information to DHS and ICE, they're also at risk of being deported. So what you're seeing is not necessarily immigration as a humanitarian push. What you're seeing in the Trump administration is pure enforcement, and it's happening not just in DHS or in ICE, but it's happening in places like the ORR, which is known to, they're known to bring in kids to take care of them. But now you're seeing that those are the things that aren't being talked about. That's a big thing that the big question that I have in all this, Ari, is how are we tracking the rest of these families? Like, where are they going? We've already heard stories of parents in Central America who can't find their kids in the United States. And this is 2018. And I'll leave you with this. This is just the latest example of the United States policy that has been going on for decades of terrorizing and basically criminalizing an entire population of Central American and Mexican Mexican people.
Well,
like, this is a big problem.
You're raising the profound moral question if we talk about moral leadership. When the President of the United States comes out today and says this is a terrible thing that needs to stop, then what is the moral obligation of him and then of us to deal with this terrible thing that has been done to these children, many effectively orphaned by government policy? This is real life. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.